Well, hello, online classes. Have a couple of new recordings that I'll be working on the next few weeks. I'm Jeff Birdsong, your instructor. If you've listened to and watched some of the older recordings that I've done over the summer of 2018, you can see a lot of relevance from those recordings. I will have some updated recordings. I did not have a updated recording for chapter 1. Still working on the technology at that time when I was recording in the summer. Believe we have this worked out, so I will provide a few new recordings. But many of the recordings that we'll have throughout this semester would have been recorded in the summer of 2018. Some of the references for due dates may not really connect with our class for the fall of 2018, but the rest of the material will be very relevant, so I would urge you to look at those recordings. And I have some recordings that are even older than those, in which much of the material will still be very informative and useful. So use all those recordings as the best way you can that can help prepare you for our test. So chapter 1, PowerPoints. Some things to cover before we get into some of the more detailed aspects of chapter 1. I just want you to be mindful of some of the key events that are, of course, happening pretty much on a weekly basis. And the more you're familiar with the syllabus, the more you'll understand what we have before us here. So this is being recorded in the beginning of the second week. You really should be knowledgeable of the syllabus by now. And then you start to look at these chapters, and if you follow a reading schedule of one chapter per week, you'll be in great shape. So really right now you ought to begin to start to read chapter 2. But we can see some of the other material that's due. If you check on this website on a daily basis, and that may really just involve 1 minute to look it over, then you'll be fine. But I would urge you to do that. We have discussions that are online. That will be on a weekly basis. Make sure that you prepare for those and do those. We can see here as well the chapter quizzes. As always, follow the due dates that are on the syllabus. News reviews are also done on a weekly basis, so make sure that you do those. By September 3rd, on Labor Day, of course it's all done electronically. That's when you turn in your bonus assignments. I would urge you to do those. And if you check the syllabus and some of the PowerPoint slides that we have on getting started, that's in another folder under content. You'll be able to find that information. Okay, going into chapter 1, American Political Culture. This is an interesting quote from page 3, very beginning part of the book. Although most people complain about something that government does to them, most everyone wants the government to do a great deal for them. So in a way, consider early on in this text some of the ways in which we can see the need for government. At least there has been this belief that government needs to provide certain services that no other institution can do so. And so that then leads us to say we need a fairly active government. And so that's worthwhile for you to review if you feel that way, and then how do we ensure that we have a government that does the kind of work that we would need. But it also tells us that we have this love-hate relationship with government there as well. How much do you believe the government responds to your demands and that your activity and your voice is being heard? And that's the issue raised about political efficacy. So note that issue on page 8 in your text. Read about that, think about it. It's brought out in this text here, a fantastic book that we have at the NEO Library, Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, and deals with the idea that, and a lot of evidence to back up this idea, that the public is not as active as it once was. And perhaps we're starting to see more activism once again. This book is over 20 years old, so perhaps some of the issues that's being raised are not necessarily always that evident today, but it is worth considering. Do we believe that we have political efficacy, that we can influence the government? How do we go about doing that? Those are some big questions that are raised here in this text, and it's a challenge for us that we see in this book here, Bowling Alone, and in our own textbook. So some of the reasons why we may not have this belief in political efficacy: the changes in technology, the changes in family structure, changes in the housing structure as well, where people live, how they commute to work, all those things. So does this create a diminishing stock in social capital, as you can see there on the second bullet point? And we have less activity in politics. Big questions that throughout this text, throughout this semester, I hope that you'll consider. So again, the structure here, the root of this is political efficacy, the ability to influence government and politics. Do you have that ability? Do you believe that? Why do some people have that and some people don't? Big questions that, again, we'll consider throughout this semester. Now, perhaps in some ways there's an issue with our form of government, democracy. You'll see this on page 13, brought out here. It's not the first person, and nor will be the last, but one of the more prominent individuals to question the benefits of democracy was the Greek philosopher Socrates. You can see the statue of him there. That democracy does not concern itself with the truth, but instead is concerned with public relations. And that's a concern as far as Socrates is concerned, and my guess would be many of us would be concerned with that. So it's interesting to note, is there a problem with the government that we tend to favor the most? So when we look at politics, we can see that there are reasons why people don't like politics. Think of the definition in your own text there. Some other definitions, and this is also part of what you can have in your bonus if you want to work on that. But we can see here that there's a struggle. There is going to be conflict, and your text definition brings out the word conflict. But this very traditional definition in American politics, but really politics around the world, and politics even beyond government, who gets what, when, and how? We can see there that the budget brings up that question. Who gets what from the budget? Another definition deals with values. Who wins the election will bring values to power and positions of power. The authoritative allocation of values. Not everyone has the same opinion, as we can see here, on some very important and big issues. And so here we see the conflict over the leadership structure and policies of government. That's your textbook definition. So there are winners and losers. The reason for those struggles, then, there's a limited resource. Not enough for everyone. And then again, there are different values. Some people may value more freedom than order. The drug issue is clearly one of those areas where we see that being brought out. The traditional roles of government, as we can see here, to maintain order, to provide public goods, and to promote equality. Once again, we can see debate on what is the best way to define these roles of government. Some of you would want more order than others. Some of you would want more public goods than others. And some of you would want the government to promote more equality than others in this class. There's where we have the conflict. We have at least the difference of opinion. So in providing public goods, probably some of the best ways that we look at this, page 630 in your text, a good or service that is provided by the government because it either is not supplied by the market or is not supplied in sufficient quantities. One of the struggles that we always see with public goods is how much do people need to be involved in providing these public goods? So there's going to be some people, some percentage of people, that would be known as a free rider. And how many free riders can the system tolerate? Big question. And that may vary from one society to the next. We have dilemmas dealing with government. Again, conflict, difficult to resolve, freedom versus order. In a way, think that over. Enforcing order reduces freedom, and expanding freedom limits order. Then you have a modern dilemma. Enforcing equality reduces the freedom for individuals to make decisions, and allowing more freedom for some individuals can reduce the equality for others. So if you look at those three values, freedom, order, and equality, the classical dilemma is freedom versus order. The modern dilemma, freedom versus equality. Something has to give. So in a way, think of the California law, and this is now, I first introduced this a few years back, that it was California law. It's now an issue in many states dealing with transgendered individuals. To promote more freedom for transgendered individuals, and many of us can see the reasons for doing that, but does it also perhaps limit freedom for other individuals and in their activity with transgendered individuals? Especially the best way to look at that would be the use of restrooms. And so clearly, some of you may look this over and say, what's the big issue? Where others would say this is a very important issue. That's, of course, where we get political struggle. So there you can see this conflict dealing with freedom versus equality. Different ways of analyzing the role of government. Thomas Hobbes, that you'll see referenced here in this first chapter, believed that you needed to have a very powerful government that would in fact restrict order, was necessary for society to survive. Contrast that with Rousseau, a philosopher from Switzerland, who believed that you needed to have a limited government to allow individuals to have more freedom, and that in fact society would be better as a result of that. So at the heart of this, and you look at this debate between, still to this day, Rousseau versus Hobbes, how much do you trust the individual? You on your own, how much would you trust your individual neighbor, your members, your friends that live in your residence halls, your fellow voters? How much do you trust to give them more freedom? Would you think society would be better if that happened? Or would it be worse off as a result? Some of the major issues there to consider. So when we look at American political culture, as we can see here, broadly shared values, beliefs, and attitudes about how the government should function. American political culture emphasizes the values of liberty, equality, and democracy. So spend some time on that page, looking that over, and look at that issue. Also then consider just really how much government do you want? What are we looking for? You have on one end of the spectrum, you can have no government. You can have a very limited government, libertarianism, or you could have a complete control from the government, totalitarianism. So when you read through page 14, consider examples that might be out there, certainly of totalitarianism. Might be hard to find examples of libertarianism and anarchism. And that's worth noting. Could they really even survive? So consider where the American government might be somewhere within that spectrum. Of course, it's certainly not anarchy, nor is it totalitarian. It's not libertarian either. So where would the amount of government in the United States, where would that be located on that spectrum? So again, we can always see through the advent of technology and power just how much government do you want and how trusting are you. Think about the tremendous amount of power that's found in the individual hands of people working in the government. Somebody manning control of a drone could fire off a drone, kill people 10,000 miles away from where that person is sitting, all at the keyboard of a computer. And just using a joystick, essentially, could now wreak havoc on people just several time zones away. It's an amazing time in which we're living, but it also opens up opportunities for tremendous abuse as well. So how trusting should we be? That's been a question that's been raised in the last few years. If you look at an individual like Edward Snowden, who worked for as a contractor for the U.S. federal government, the National Security Administration, National Security Agency, excuse me, and a very powerful organization. And Mr. Snowden was led to believe that we're having an abuse of the Fourth Amendment in the processes of the NSA and their activities. And so he stopped doing that and actually has left the country. So is he a good citizen, or is he actually causing harm to the American government by spilling some of the secrets? Again, how trusting should we be of the government? And does the government, in its process of needing to do its job, actually, does it need to reduce freedoms for some individuals? And that's the question that's being raised in the world that we're living in today. So hopefully, many of you already view yourself as the need to be an active citizen, to be an informed citizen. And more so, throughout this semester, more of you will have that belief that you'll want to be an active citizen. And so you can read about that on page 11. And I think we can see in our form of government, we need to have people that do believe that that's their role and that's what they need to do. So consider citizenship and consider what it means. It's not just being a citizen of the country, that there's a need to be an active member within that country. And are you taking that opportunity to do that? Something to consider there on page 11 of your text. So as we can also see here in the way this chapter summarizes, by looking at the changes in the United States. And so the study of population, we can see evidence that there is changes occurring here in the United States. What is the current ethnic or racial variety in the United States? And how has it changed? So when you're reading through those pages, find ways to answer those questions. Where is the population shifted? Where do we see most of the people living in the United States? This is certainly, when it comes to congressional districts and the Electoral College, a key way of showing where the power is located in the United States as well. And so that's a way to consider how it influences the politics here in this country.